a fishing vessel flies the British flag off the English coast. Its ownership chain leads to a Dutch family company in the Netherlands. Their UK subsidiary controls roughly 23% of England's fishing quota in key species like mackerel and herring. Brexit was supposed to take back control of these waters. But the system that handed those rights away wasn't designed in Brussels. It was built in Britain. The promise was simple enough. Britain would take back control of its waters. But beneath the surface, the real contest was never about lines on a map or saltwater boundaries. It was about quota, the legal rights to catch fish, measured and divided with bureaucratic precision. The Frank Boniface, a super trawler flying the British flag, became the face of this contradiction. Registered in Hull, its paperwork and paint jobs suggest British allegiance. Yet its catch rights, and the profits they bring, flow back to a Dutch parent company. The distinction matters. Owning the right to fish is not the same as owning the sea itself, but for coastal communities, the effect is much the same. A British flag on the stern does not guarantee British control. The Frank Boniface stands as a reminder that, in this system, national identity is often a technicality. The slogan of regain sovereignty collides with the reality of who actually holds the keys to the quota vault. The system that now shapes who can fish in British waters began with a series of reforms in the late 1990s. In 1996, policymakers set out to bring order to what had been a chaotic scramble for fish. Their answer was Fixed Quota Allocation, or FQA, a method that would tie the right to catch fish to past performance and then freeze those rights in place. The process started with a consultation in 1998, followed by the legal rollout in 1999. The government used landing records from 1994 to 1996 as the baseline. Every ton of cod, mackerel, or herring landed in those years was broken down into units of 100 kilograms. These units became the currency of the new system. At first glance, this approach seemed fair. Those who had caught fish before would get a share of the future. But the FQA was more than a record-keeping device. It transformed quota into a private asset. Holders could buy, sell, or lease their units, just like property. The logic was tidy. Reward those who had invested in larger boats and bigger catches, and let the market sort out who should fish next. The result was legal clarity, but also a kind of economic enclosure, a boundary drawn not on the sea, but on paper. This was not a scheme hatched in Brussels, nor a foreign imposition. The rules were made in Britain by British officials, with the intention of bringing stability to the industry. Yet by anchoring rights to a narrow window of history and then making them tradable, the system laid the groundwork for concentration. A handful of large operators, armed with historic catch records, could accumulate quota far beyond what any one community might imagine. The FQA turned the sea's abundance into a ledger of entitlements and the ledger into a marketplace. For those left out, the promise of control over British waters began to look like a technicality. Cornelis Vrolijk is not a household name on the British coast, but its influence runs deep beneath the surface. This Dutch family group built its fortune on pelagic fishing, mackerel, horse mackerel, blue whiting, herring, and by the late 1990s it had found a new home for its operations, North Atlantic Fishing Company, a UK-registered arm based in Caterham and Hull. That British paperwork is more than a formality. It is the key that unlocks the quota vault. Through North Atlantic Holdings, the group sits atop a remarkable share of English fishing rights. Official records show that about 23% of all English stock-specific fixed quota allocation units, FQA units, are tied to this single holding. Across the entire UK, the group controls roughly 5.5% of all FQA units. But the numbers only tell part of the story. These rights are not spread across every species or every port. They are concentrated in the pelagic stocks that drive the industrial freezer trawler trade: mackerel, horse mackerel, blue whiting, and herring. In effect, One company holds the legal right to catch nearly a quarter of England's most valuable pelagic fish. The structure is deliberate, layered, and perfectly legal. Cornelis Vrolik Holding BV owns North Atlantic Holdings, which in turn owns North Atlantic Fishing Company, which operates the vessels. The group's flagship, the Frank Boniface, sails under a British flag, lands its catch in Dutch ports, and traces its profits back to the Netherlands. For British policymakers, this concentration was not an accident, but a byproduct of the FQA's logic. Reward those with the biggest historic catches, and let the market decide the rest. For many coastal communities, however, Cornelis Vrolik became the face of a system where the benefits of British waters could be swept away by a single foreign-controlled operation, all within the letter of the law. Along the harbours of Cornwall and the East Coast, the numbers are hard to miss. Nearly 4 out of every 5 fishing boats in Britain are small, under 10 metres, often run by families who have worked the same waters for generations. Yet all those boats together hold only about 6% of the national quota. For many, the market that was supposed to bring stability has felt more like a locked door. The rules rewarded those with the biggest catches in the 1990s. That catch history became quota, and quota became an asset, something you could buy, sell, or use as collateral. As the years passed, the same logic that brought order also brought exclusion. Bigger operators, with deeper pockets and longer track records, could use their wealth to buy up more quota. The system made room for foreign companies too. Around 49% of English quota now sits with companies based in the Netherlands, Iceland, or Spain. But the pattern is not just foreign. Wealthy British families are woven into the same web, holding large shares through private companies. For the small boat fleet, the effect is blunt. The sea may be open, but the right to fish it is not. What was once a shared resource has become a ledger of entitlements, and the lines in that ledger rarely favour the small harbours. February 2014, the Marine Management Organisation boarded the Frank Boniface as it worked the western approaches. The vessel had entered the mackerel box, a closed area designed to protect stocks, without giving the required notice. On board, inspectors found 632,000 kilograms of mackerel, far above what should have been allowed. The case went to court. Both the master and the owner pleaded guilty. The fines landed hard, £97,000 for each, plus £5,000 in costs. But the numbers told a different story. The catch itself was not confiscated. Instead, it could be sold on the open market, fetching about £437,000. The company described the breach as a technical error, a paperwork slip in a world of forms and quotas. The punishment was real, but the economic logic of the system stayed intact. A penalty, yes, but not enough to erase the value of the haul. For many watching from the harbours, the lesson was clear. Even when rules are broken, the structure of profit and quota remains untouched. The post-Brexit settlement promised a reset, but the fine print told a different story. The UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement set out a phased return of fishing rights. Over 5.5 years, Britain would reclaim 25% of the quota that once belonged to EU fleets in its waters. That adjustment period runs until June 2026. Yet the transfer, while headline-grabbing, arrived with limits. Full reciprocal access between UK and EU vessels is guaranteed until 2038, locking in a long horizon of shared exploitation even as the rhetoric spoke of regained control. Inside Britain, the question of who could fish and who could profit remained tied to the old logic. The allocation of new quota leaned heavily on historic uptake and the geography of past catches. Vessels and companies that had already amassed large shares in the 1990s found themselves well positioned to absorb the extra allowance. For the small boat fleet, the change was more symbolic than practical. The ledger of entitlements, built on decades-old records, still dictated who could fish what and where. The argument over quota never really ended with Brexit. Instead, it shifted from Brussels to Westminster, from European law to British policy. At the heart of the debate is a simple but unresolved question. Should quota be treated as a public good, managed for the benefit of all, or as a market asset, bought, sold, and accumulated by those with the means to pay? Legal sovereignty may have changed hands, but the structure of economic power, the right to fish, the right to profit, remains stubbornly familiar. The contradiction is not hidden. It is written into the rules themselves. Quota is not a flag, it's a ledger. Today, legal sovereignty rests in Westminster, but the arithmetic of who fishes where was set long before Brexit and still favours those with the most history, not the most need. Control, it turns out, is not the same as change.